The Rivers State chapter of the Nigeria Labour Congress joined in with the protests marching to the State Assembly. Chairwoman Beatrice Itubo says the ability to pay the minimum wage does not depend on resources but on the discipline of employers. She says retaining the minimum wage is a fight for the survival and livelihood of the workers.
Well, to discuss this, we're joined by GARBA DATI Mohammed, the member of the House of Representatives who sponsored the bill, and COMRADE UCHENNA EKWE, the liaison to the National Assembly from the Nigeria Labour Congress, is on our off-site studio. But let me start with you, Honourable Member of House of Rep. The bill you sponsored, what was your intention and what did you hope it will achieve?
Well, the background of the bill is item number 34 in the exclusive legislative law, which places the subject of prescribing national minimum wage within the legislative competence of the National Assembly by section 4, subsection 2 and 3 of the Constitution as amended. And we know this has always been a problem. It has always been a controversial issue whenever there is issue of a minimum wage. We could remember when the minimum wage was raised to 18,000, there was vehement opposition from the state that they could not pay. Even before that one was settled, it was now again raised to 30,000 as minimum wage, which most states say they cannot pay. So our concern here, our justification for this is I don't think there is any propriety by the federal government to impose a uniform minimum wage across the country, because their resources are various, that of federal government and the state. Even within the states, you find that the resources are not the same. Even within local governments, the resources are not the same. So I could remember the governor of Ebonyi State coming out clearly to say that every month they have to borrow 1 billion naira to the local government to be able to pay the state. And he said most of the states use 100% of their revenue to settle
staff salary.
Salary.
Yeah.
So this has become this is a reality, a fact of life of Nigeria. And we cannot pretend that this thing doesn't exist. Laws are meant to be obeyed.
Okay, we will definitely allow you to explore all of those points, but let's bring in our comrade UCHENNA EKWE right here, who is in our off-site studio. Thanks for joining us on Newsnight. Well, the National Assembly has said the NLC strike is nothing short of a waste of time. You know, how would you react to this? Because they are saying a strike is really not the best way, that it's become old-fashioned, really, you know, to insist on a strike, to press home your point.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, the National Assembly never said so. Because even the voice you gave was the reaction of the leadership of the National Assembly. And of course, there was no strike. What we had was a protest. So I don't understand what it means to be old-fashioned. But remember, those who silence reaction for justice are creating a situation for violent reaction. So if anybody ever imagines to say that a time will come when strike will be outdated, that person is saying that a time have come when violence will take over the scene. But first and foremost, the National Assembly never said so. The voice message you heard said that they will look into the bill with the intent to deal with it appropriately. But let me call our mind back that second to the last constitutional amendment, the issue of minimum wage and even labor itself, to be or not to be in exclusive legislative list, came up. And that assembly took this matter to all the constituencies, and the overwhelming vote from constituencies rejected the removal of minimum wage / labor from exclusive legislative list. I had the privilege of being a one-time member of the House of Reps myself, and was a deputy chairman of House Committee on Labor. So I understand the process.
Okay. Sorry, let me very quickly ask you then. The question will be, it seems like it makes a lot of sense to have a situation where you can say exclusive lists should not be for minimum wage because there are states that just cannot afford 30,000. And if it is the decision made by the federal government, then it becomes like it's almost binding. But they can't afford it, unless we're saying they should all go broke. Don't you agree with what looks like a common sense solution by the National Assembly?
No, stop saying the National Assembly. This is not the position of the National Assembly. It is a bill sponsored by Honorable Dati, and that is Honorable Dati's thought. And I think Honorable Dati did not benefit from full knowledge of what the intent of minimum wage is and what it is. First, the minimum wage was never imposed. It took a negotiation that lasted a year and 6 months, which had in it, because minimum wage, as provided by the law, it's never imposed. It's a negotiated instrument by the tripartite body. Honorable Dati should be educated that this tripartite body has the federal government, the state governors represented by 6 governors, which represents the government side in the negotiating of the tribe.
Very quickly, let me come to you, Honorable Dati. I mean, you are saying that minimum wage should be decentralized, that it should reflect our true federation. And a lot of people are saying, you seem to be nitpicking. If you say that minimum wage should be decentralized, why don't we have a wholesale, decentralization of governance? Quickly, in 30 seconds.
This is a constitutional amendment. Any member has a right to pick any topic he feels he has interest. I'm not the only member of the House of Reps, and I want to correct the impression created by Comrade UCHENNA that is a private issue to me. It has gone beyond that. It was debated during the second reading in the House of Representatives. It was overwhelmingly voted for. It has gone beyond me. He cannot tell me that I'm ignorant of laws of minimum wage. Can he tell me that people like Chief Afe Babalola, who has come out strongly in support of this bill, can he tell me that the strong editorial of the Punch of 8
all right, we'll have to put you on hold. Thank you so much.
So,
we'll take a short break and come back and talk some more. Do stay with us. All right, welcome back. We have Honorable Dati, the sponsor of the minimum wage bill, calling for a review of that, of course, and Comrade UCHENNA EKWE is in our offsite studio. You were making a point earlier, and let me add this very quickly. Don't you think it is the job of the National Assembly now to come up with laws that can help the states actually function and be able to stand alone in terms of their financials?
Yes, that's why I would say this is one of the most egalitarian bills that will be sponsored. Because to leave the issue of exclusive legislative laws, the National Assembly, excluding the State Assembly from making minimum wage, I think it's cumbersome. I cannot just sit in Abuja and make minimum wage for Taraba, for Ekiti State, for Rivers. They have their State Assembly, which budgets normally goes to that state. They know the strength of that state. The only option that is always there is, if they cannot pay, is either to borrow or return, to reduce, to downsize the number of their workers. So which options do you have? Are we pretending that this thing is not a reality?
Is it not the structure, the present structure that seems to tie the hands of the states, the state governors?
Yeah, yes. You see, when this 30,000 minimum wage was introduced, the federal government was giving bailout to state to help them. At the stage, they could not continue it again. It was just a transitional arrangement. And now, since the federal government has stopped giving the bailout, most of the state cannot pay. And this is the situation. There is no point making laws that are not implementable. And there is no consequences, no penalty for not implementation. So what's the essence? What we are saying is there are others, there are several socio-economic variables, there are local peculiarities. When you look at cost of living, cost of transportation in Abuja, cost of accommodation, cost of feeding, school fees, and others, it's not the same when you take a state like Yobe, like Ekiti, like Ebonyi. They are not the same. So these are local peculiarities that you have to look at. As Chief Alfred Babalora rightly said, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
He said, what you pay as a rent for a medium worker in Abuja is enough to purchase a house. That's 1 year rent. It's enough to buy a house in another part of this country.
Okay,
Which is different. People can advocate for even higher than the national minimum wage has obtained in the US as of 2018.
Thank you very much.
There are 29 out of the 50 states that pay higher than the national minimum wage.
Okay, thank you. Let's go. Okay, let's go very quickly because we need to wrap this conversation up as quickly as possible. So, Mr. Ekwe, now you've heard what the honorable member of the House has said. He's the sponsor of the bill. It is not just his idea. It's also the idea of some members of the State House. Oh, okay. All right. Please go ahead.
Please give me the time you gave him. First, his last statement contradicts the whole argument he made. The United States, he gave as an example, has a minimum national minimum wage, of which several states pay more than the national minimum wage. The minimum wage is the barest minimum, the benchmark for the most vulnerable. And the state and the nation state and governance have the first primary duty to protect its citizenry, especially the most vulnerable. Let the Honorable and the Alfred Babalola he's quoting and his cohorts on this driver for this national attempt to commit a national disaster. That the state, the constituent of Nigerian state is not just made up of federal workers and state workers. That the majority of the Nigerian working people neither work for the state or for the federal government, but for private companies and organized private sector. And who will now
very, very quickly, we have barely 1 minute to go. The National Assembly, part of what the National Assembly is saying is that the NLC and other labor bodies should address the issue of productivity and not necessarily demanding for pay rise or this minimum wage. What do you say to that?
The issue of productivity, I keep wondering where you said the National Assembly, because I don't know the National Assembly who said so. But who dictates the pace? Is it the worker who is empowered to work, or the person who determines productivity? The worker is ever ready to give his productivity the maximum if given the right tools, and he is waiting for the tools. And the workers have driven the machinery, the wheel of progress of this country to where we are. But let me remind Honorable Dati that the Revenue and Fiscal Mobilization Commission stayed in Abuja and fixed the wages of councillors of all the states, House of Assembly members, commissioners, and all the political office holders, and they received that. And that he have not found any reason
not enough time really to explore so many issues, especially with also mismanagement and wastage in governance, whether there is a need to actually trim that. Very quickly, in 30 seconds if you can.
Okay.
No, we can't.
Unfortunately,
thank you so much.
Time is against us.
Okay, Honorable Dati, thank you so much for joining us, and Comrade UCHENNA, EKWE. The debate, of course, continues.